Hey guys, tonight we slip through the dusty gates of ancient Babylon, a city pulsing with chaos and wonder, where the air smells of baked earth and ambition. Picture yourself standing on a sun-scorched street, the Euphrates River glinting nearby, while merchants shout and donkeys bray. Towering mud brick walls loom overhead, etched with the might of kings who don't mess around. You're not just visiting, you're living here. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. One wrong step, and you're either dodging a royal guard's spear or sweating through a priest's ominous prophecy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake at dawn, the first rays of sunlight searing through the reed mat covering your tiny window. Your home, a cramped mud brick box, already feels like an oven. Babylon, around 1800 BCE, isn't exactly a vacation spot. This is the heart of Mesopotamia, a cradle of civilization, but it's also a brutal place to scrape by. You're no noble sipping barley beer in a palace. You're a commoner, maybe a farmer or laborer, and every day tests your grit. The city hums with 50,000 people. Historians estimate this based on archaeological records, making it a bustling hub for its time. But bustling means crowded, noisy, and cutthroat. Your first task is survival, and it starts with water. You grab a clay jug and head to the nearest canal, a lifeline fed by the Euphrates. The water's murky, and you're pretty sure something just wiggled in it, but you've got no choice. Boiling? Not really a thing yet. You mutter a quick prayer to Ea, the water god, because offending him could mean floods or drought. Religion isn't optional here. It's woven into every moment. Speaking of gods, here's a quirky tidbit. Babylonians believed divine anger caused toothaches, so priests might chant over your molar instead of pulling it. Good luck with that. You trudge back home, juggling the sloshing jug, and already your sandals, more like woven reed scraps, are fraying. The streets are a maze of narrow alleys, packed with people haggling over figs or dodging stray goats. You pass a scribe etching cuneiform into a clay tablet, his stylus moving with the precision of a surgeon. Writing, one of Babylon's gifts to the world, tracks everything from taxes to epic poems. But don't get romantic. Most people, including you, can't read. Historians still argue whether literacy was a privilege or a punishment, given the grueling training scribes endured. By mid-morning, you're sweating through your linen tunic, the only thing shielding you from the 100-degree heat. You've got work to do, likely in the fields outside the city walls. Farming's no picnic. You're wrestling with a wooden plow while praying the canal doesn't dry up. Babylon's irrigation system is a marvel, channeling river water to crops, but it's also a headache. One clogged ditch, and your barley's toast. Oh, and watch out for scorpions. Those little jerks are everywhere. Here's a joke to lighten the mood. Why did the Babylonian farmer quit? His plow kept breaking, and his boss was a real Hammurabi about it. You're not just battling nature, you're dodging human traps too. The king's tax collectors roam like hawks, demanding grain or silver. Pay up, or you're hauling bricks for the palace as punishment. And don't even think about mouthing off. Hammurabi's code, carved in stone, doesn't play nice. Steal a loaf, lose a hand. It's mainstream history that this code, one of the earliest legal systems, aimed to unify Babylon's justice. But it's also a reminder. One slip, and you're done. As you slog through the day, you wonder if tomorrow will be kinder. Spoiler, it won't. The city's demands never sleep, and neither does its heat. You're still in ancient Babylon, the sun climbing higher, turning the city into a giant clay oven. Your muscles ache from yesterday's labor, but there's no hitting snooze in 1800 BCE. Today you're hauled into one of Babylon's most grueling gigs, building the city's massive mud brick walls. These aren't just walls, they're the heartbeat of Babylon's defense, stretching miles and standing taller than three of you stacked. You're not here for glory. You're here because the foreman barked your name, and refusing means a one-way ticket to the king's bad side. You join a crew of sunburned laborers at the city's edge, where the air smells of wet clay and sweat. Your job is to mix mud with straw, shape it into bricks, and stack them under the watchful eyes of overseers who don't believe in breaks. The process is backbreaking. You scoop river mud with your hands, kneading it with straw until it's just sticky enough to hold. Each brick weighs as much as a small child, and you're expected to churn out dozens before noon. Mainstream history notes these walls, reinforced over centuries, were a marvel, possibly inspiring tales of Babylon's invincibility. But right now, you're cursing every squelching handful. The quirky thing? Babylonians sometimes buried little clay figurines in the walls for protection. You spot one being tucked into a corner, a creepy, wide-eyed doll meant to ward off evil spirits. You're not sure if it's charming or unhinged, but you're too tired to care. You just hope it doesn't curse the wall to collapse on you. Historians still argue whether these figurines were religious, magical, or just superstitious clutter, but they're a reminder. Babylonians saw spirits everywhere, and you're supposed to respect that. You hoist another brick, your back screaming, and dodge a stray clump of mud flung by a clumsy coworker. The overseer yells something about faster, and you bite back a sarcastic retort. Joke time. Why don't Babylonian walls ever fall? Because they're held together by your tears and regret. The heat's relentless, pushing 110 degrees, and your water jug's already half empty. You ration sips, knowing the canal's a long trek away. Flies buzz around your face, and you swat them with a muddy hand, smearing your cheek. Glamorous, right? The walls aren't just for show. They're Babylon's shield against invaders like the Elamites, who'd love to ransack this place. But maintenance is a nightmare. Rain, rare as it is, turns the bricks to mush, so you're constantly patching. You climb a rickety scaffold, balancing bricks on your shoulder, and pray you don't slip. One wrong move, and you're a pancake under a pile of clay. The guy next to you grumbles about last week's collapse that crushed 2 workers. No one talks about compensation here. You just keep stacking. By afternoon, your hands are cracked, and your tunic's a muddy mess. You glance at the city behind you, its ziggurat piercing the sky like a divine middle finger. That's Marduk's temple, where priests live better than you ever will. The class divide stings. You're breaking your back while nobles sip date wine in the shade. You wonder if you'll ever climb the social ladder, but in Babylon, that's like asking a donkey to fly. Another joke. What's a Babylonian laborer's favorite song? Mud, sweat, and tears. As the sun dips, you're allowed a brief rest. You slump against a half-built wall, chewing a stale barley cake that tastes like dirt. The foreman's still shouting, but you tune him out, watching the Euphrates glint in the distance. Remember that murky water you drank yesterday? Yeah, it's probably why your stomach's rumbling in protest. Tomorrow you might be back in the fields or dodging tax collectors. But for now, you're stuck here. A tiny cog in Babylon's relentless machine. The walls rise higher, brick by brick. And you're not sure if you're building a city or a prison. The Babylonian sun hasn't let up, but you're off the wall building grind for now. Lucky you. Today, you're thrust into the heart of the city's legal jungle, where Hammurabi's code rules with an iron fist. You're not a lawyer, but you're forced to navigate this maze of laws because one misstep could cost you your hand, your eye, or worse. The year's still around 1800 BCE, and Babylon's king, Hammurabi, has made sure everyone knows his 282 rules, carved into a massive black stone stele that looms in the city square. You pass it on your way to settle a dispute, its cuneiform glaring like a warning sign. You're at the square because your neighbor claims you owe him a sheep for a broken fence. He's loud, waving his arms, and the crowd's eating it up. Disputes like this are settled by elders or royal judges, and you're sweating, not just from the heat, but because the code's punishments are brutal. Mainstream history hails Hammurabi's code as one of the first written legal systems, standardizing justice across Babylon. It covers everything from theft to marriage, but it's not exactly fair. Nobles get slaps on the wrist. Commoners like you get crushed. You stand before the judge, a stern man with a beard like a bird's nest. You explain your side. The fence broke because his donkey kicked it. He counters that you built it shoddily. The judge consults a clay tablet, muttering about Law 229. If a builder's work collapses and causes damage, he pays up. Or worse. You're no builder, but the vibe's clear. Someone's getting blamed. Here's a quirky tidbit. The code once ruled that if a man's ox gored someone, he could pay a fine. Unless the ox was a known menace, then he's in deep trouble. Babylonians loved their ox drama. Historians still argue whether the code was enforced literally or more like a guideline. Some say the eye for an eye stuff was symbolic. Others point to records of actual hands chopped off. Either way, you're not keen to test it. The judge rules in your favor, barely. You owe half a sheep, which means selling your best clay pot. You trudge home, muttering about how neighbors are worse than scorpions. Joke time. Why did the Babylonian judge quit? Too many sheepish excuses in court. The code's shadow follows you everywhere. You pass a merchant accused of shortchanging a customer. He's facing a fine or public shaming. A woman nearby whispers about her husband's trial for abandoning her. She's hoping for Law 142, which lets her leave him without losing her dowry. The system's rigid, favoring men and the rich, and you're painfully aware of your place at the bottom. You dodge a royal guard patrolling the street, his spear glinting. One wrong move, like bumping into him, and you're citing Law 206 to avoid a beating. By afternoon, you're back in the alleys, the air thick with dust and the stench of tanning hides. You're still fuming about that half-sheep ruling when you spot a kid stealing a date from a stall. The vendor grabs him, yelling about Law 21. Thieves get harsh penalties, maybe even death. You slip away, not wanting to see the outcome. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's favorite law? The one they didn't break today. The day drags on, and you're bone-tired, your tunic sticking to your skin. You pass the stele again, its laws a constant reminder that Babylon's order comes at a cost. You think back to the mud brick walls you stacked yesterday. Hard labor, sure, but at least you knew where you stood. Here, in the legal maze, every word's a trap. You head home, hoping tomorrow's less about disputes and more about staying alive. But in Babylon, hope's a risky bet. You're still trudging through ancient Babylon, the sun a relentless hammer overhead. And today you're tossed into the city's pulsing core, the marketplace. It's a sprawling, chaotic bazaar where the air buzzes with shouts, the clink of silver, and the sharp tang of spices. You're not here to browse. You're bartering for essentials, like barley or a new pair of sandals, because your old ones are basically dust. This is 1800 BCE, and Babylon's market is the economic heart of Mesopotamia, a hub linking traders from as far as India and Egypt. But for you, it's a high-stakes gauntlet where one bad deal could leave you hungry. You weave through the crowd, dodging a donkey piled with reed baskets and a kid chasing a runaway chicken. Stalls line the dusty square, heaped with dates, wool, and clay pots. Merchants hawk their wares like they're auditioning for a Babylonian talent show, each one louder than the last. Mainstream history credits Babylon's markets with pioneering early trade systems, using silver as a proto-currency alongside barter. You clutch a small sack of barley, your bargaining chip, and hope it's enough for a jug of oil. Spoiler, it probably isn't. You approach a stall where a grizzled trader eyes you like you're a walking scam. You offer your barley for his oil, and he laughs, saying it's worth half a jug, tops. Bartering's an art, and you're no Picasso. You haggle, throwing in a spare clay bead, and he finally relents. But as you hand over the barley, you notice his scales are fishy, literally and figuratively. He's using dodgy weights, a trick as old as the ziggurat. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Babylonian merchants kept lucky fish bones in their stalls, believing they'd charm buyers. You're not charmed, just annoyed. Historians still argue whether market cheating was rampant or just overblown by grumpy scribes. Clay tablets record complaints about fake weights, but maybe that's just the ancient Yelp reviews of the day. You let it slide. Calling him out could spark a brawl, and you've seen fists fly over less. You grab your oil and move on, weaving past a woman selling pungent fish sauce. Your stomach churns. That stuff smells like a camel's bad day. Joke time. Why's the Babylonian market so loud? Because everyone's shouting over their own bad deals. The market's not just about goods. It's a social minefield. You spot a noble in a fringed robe, his slaves trailing with baskets. He doesn't haggle, he just points, and merchants grovel. You, meanwhile, are elbowing through commoners and dodging pickpockets. One wrong glance at the wrong guy, and you're in a shouting match. You pass a stall selling amulets for protection, and you're tempted. Market stress is real. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's favorite market buy? A thicker skin. By afternoon, you're drained. Your tunic damp with sweat and dusted with marketplace grit. You've scored the oil but lost your patience. The crowd's thinning, but the heat's still brutal, and your water jug's empty. You think back to that muddy canal water from a few days ago. Yeah, your stomach's still not forgiving you for that. The market's a microcosm of Babylon, vibrant, cutthroat, and unforgiving. You head home, clutching your hard-won jug, knowing tomorrow might drag you back here or worse, back to the mud brick grind. For now, you just want shade and a moment to breathe. You're still stuck in the sweltering sprawl of ancient Babylon, and today you're pulled toward the city's spiritual epicenter, the towering ziggurat of Marduk, god of just about everything here. The air hums with incense and nervous energy as you approach, your reed sandals slapping against the baked clay path. You're not here by choice. Your family sent you to make an offering, hoping to appease Marduk after a string of bad luck. It's around 1800 BCE, and in Babylon, religion isn't a Sunday hobby, it's a full-time job, and the gods are moody bosses. The ziggurat looms, a stepped pyramid of mud brick that looks like it's daring the sky to fight back. You climb the outer stairs, each step a reminder of your place in the cosmic pecking order. Priests in white robes glide past, their shaved heads gleaming, and you feel like a dusty nobody. Mainstream history notes that ziggurats were religious and administrative hubs, with Babylon's Etemenanki possibly inspiring the biblical Tower of Babel. But up close, it's less mythical, more intimidating. A bureaucratic fortress where gods and humans haggle. You reach the temple platform, clutching a small clay figurine as your offering. The altar's slick with oil and blood from earlier sacrifices. Mostly lambs, thank goodness. Not the human ones whispered about in fringe tales. Here's the quirky bit. Some Babylonians believed Marduk's priests could curse you with a single glare, a superstition that kept folks in line. You avoid eye contact, just in case. You place your figurine on the altar, muttering a prayer you barely understand, while a priest chants in a language that sounds like a drunk poet's fever dream. Historians still argue whether these rituals were heartfelt devotion or just social control. Did the priests believe their own hype, or were they fleecing the masses? You're too nervous to care. The air's thick with myrrh, and your head's spinning. A nearby worshiper collapses, claiming a vision, and you wonder if it's divine or just heat stroke. Joke time. Why's Marduk's temple so intense? Because even the gods here demand overtime. You're ushered toward a side chamber where a priest inspects your offering. He's unimpressed, muttering about better clay next time. You bite back a retort. Sassing a priest is a fast track to divine smiting. The chamber's walls are carved with scenes of Marduk slaying chaos monsters, a reminder that Babylon's gods don't mess around. You think back to that murky Euphrates water you drank days ago. Maybe that's why your luck's sour. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's worst fear? A priest saying, Marduk's not impressed. As you leave, you pass a crowd watching a ritual dance. Drums thumping, dancers spinning in linen skirts. It's hypnotic, but you're too jittery to enjoy it. The ziggurat's shadow feels like it's watching you, and you're not sure if you've pleased Marduk or just dodged his wrath. You trudge back toward the city's maze of alleys, the weight of divine expectations heavy on your shoulders. The market's chaos from yesterday feels almost cozy compared to this. Tomorrow might drag you back to the fields or worse, but for now, you just want to slip into your mud brick home and forget the gods' piercing gaze. You're still trudging through the relentless heat of ancient Babylon, the city's dust clinging to your sweat-soaked tunic. Today, you're not dodging priests or haggling in the market. You're grappling with the raw struggle of staying alive in Mesopotamia's brutal climate. It's around 1800 BCE, and the sun's a merciless tyrant, scorching the earth and everything on it. You're outside the city walls, tending a small barley field, but it's less about farming and more about battling a landscape that seems to hate you. The air's so dry it crackles, and every breath feels like inhaling a furnace. Your job is to keep your crops alive, but the heat, often hitting 115 degrees, makes it a cruel game. You lug water from a nearby canal, the same murky Euphrates runoff you've been drinking for days. Remember that stomachache? Yeah, it's still haunting you. The canal's low today, and you're rationing every drop for your wilting barley. Mainstream history credits Babylon's irrigation systems with turning arid land into fertile fields, supporting a population boom. But right now, you're cursing the clogged ditch that's starving your plot. Here's the quirky tidbit. Babylonians used crocodile dung as a makeshift sunscreen, smearing it on their skin to fend off burns. You're tempted to try it, but the smell's enough to make you gag, and you're already dodging flies the size of dates. You swat one away, muttering about how even the pests here have an attitude. Historians still argue whether the climate was slightly cooler back then or just as brutal, with some citing pollen records to suggest wetter seasons. All you know is your tunic's plastered to your back, and shade's a distant dream. You pause to wipe sweat from your eyes, your reed hat offering about as much protection as a bad joke. Speaking of which, why's a Babylonian farmer always cranky? Because the sun's hotter than Hammurabi's temper. The ground's cracked, and scorpions skitter across it like they own the place. You've already had one close call with a sting. Your neighbor wasn't so lucky last week and spent days feverish, praying to Gula, the healing goddess. Medicine's a gamble here. It's mostly herbs and chance, and you're not betting on either. By noon, you're dizzy, your water jug empty. You trudge back to the canal, dodging a swarm of mosquitoes that seem to think you're lunch. The pests are relentless. Malaria's a real risk, though Babylonians just call it river fever and blame evil spirits. You're starting to think those spirits have a personal grudge. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's favorite workout? Swatting flies and dodging scorpions. You fill your jug, praying it's not teeming with something worse than last time, and haul it back to the field. The heat's only half the battle. Dust storms can roll in without warning, burying your crops in grit. You've seen entire fields wiped out, and the thought makes your stomach knot. Losing this harvest means no food, no taxes, and a one-way ticket to debt slavery. You think back to the ziggurat's ominous rituals yesterday. Maybe you should have offered a better figurine to Marduk. The day drags on, and you're bone-tired, your hands blistered from hauling water. As the sun dips, you slump under a lone palm, chewing a stale barley cake. Tomorrow might bring more field work or a new Babylonian nightmare, but for now, you just want the night's faint coolness to wash over you. You're still slogging through ancient Babylon, the heat of yesterday's field work lingering in your aching bones. Today, you're back in the city, but there's no relief, just a new kind of pressure. You're dealing with the Euphrates River, the lifeblood of Babylon, and its unpredictable moods. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're tasked with checking a canal gate near your family's plot, making sure the river's waters reach your barley without drowning it. One wrong move, and you're either starving or swimming. The river's a blessing and a curse, and today, it's feeling extra cranky. You stand at the canal's edge, the Euphrates glinting under the morning sun, its surface deceptively calm. Your job is to adjust a wooden sluice gate, a rickety contraption that controls water flow. The river's low today, but you've seen it rage, flooding fields and homes. Mainstream history notes that Babylon's survival hinged on mastering the Euphrates through canals and levees, turning marshes into farmland. But mastery's a strong word when you're wrestling with a gate that's half rotted and stuck in the mud. Here's the quirky tidbit. Babylonians sometimes tossed clay fish figurines into the river as offerings to Ea, the water god, hoping he'd keep the floods at bay. You're tempted to chuck one in yourself, but you've got no figurines, just a splintered stick and a prayer. You pry at the gate, your feet sinking into the muck, and a frog leaps out, startling you. You laugh, but it's a tired laugh. Historians still argue whether the Euphrates floods were seasonal or wildly erratic, with some clay tablets hinting at years of drought followed by deluges. All you know is the river's mood swings are worse than a merchant's in the marketplace. The gate creaks open, and water trickles into the canal. Too slow. You shove harder, and it groans, sending a gush that nearly sweeps you off your feet. You curse under your breath, hoping no one saw. Joke time. Why's the Euphrates so moody? It's got too many canals to manage and not enough coffee. You're soaked, your tunic clinging like a bad decision, and the air's buzzing with mosquitoes. You swat them, remembering the river fever that took your cousin last year. Those crocodile dung sunscreen days in the fields feel almost quaint now. You trudge along the canal, checking for leaks. The banks are crumbling, and you spot a neighbor patching his section with mud and straw. He grumbles about last month's flood that ruined his crop, and you nod, thinking of your own wilting barley. The river gives life, but it demands constant work, dredging, reinforcing, praying. You pass a shrine to Ea, its altar littered with wilted reeds. You toss a pebble as a half-hearted offering just in case. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's favorite river game? Guess if it's flood or drought this week. By afternoon, your back's screaming, and the sun's turned the canal into a steaming mirror. You're done with the gate, but the river's still a threat. A kid nearby shouts about a levee breach downstream, and you groan. More work tomorrow. You think back to the marketplace chaos a few days ago. At least there, you could haggle your way out of trouble. Here, the river doesn't negotiate. You head home, mud-caked and bone-tired, the Euphrates murmur fading behind you. Tomorrow might drag you back to the fields or worse. But for now, you just want to collapse in your mud brick box and dream of a world with less water and fewer gods. You're still caught in the relentless churn of ancient Babylon, the Euphrates' muddy scent lingering on your skin from yesterday's canal wrestle. Today, you're back in the city's cramped alleys, but the struggle's different. Social, not elemental. You're navigating Babylon's rigid class system, a hierarchy as unyielding as the ziggurats bricks. It's around 1800 BCE, And whether you're fetching water or dodging a noble's entourage, your place in the pecking order shapes every step. You're a commoner, scraping by, and the gap between you and the elite feels wider than the Euphrates. You start the day hauling a jug to the communal well, weaving through streets where mud brick homes stack like uneven teeth. A noble's litter passes, carried by slaves who keep their eyes down. The noble's robe glints with embroidered threads, and you clutch your patched tunic, feeling like a walking dust pile. Mainstream history notes Babylon's society was stratified. Kings and priests at the top, nobles and merchants in the middle, then commoners and slaves at the bottom. You're one bad harvest from slipping into debt slavery, a fate you've seen too often. At the well, you wait behind a merchant's wife, her bangles clinking as she fills her jug. She sneers when you accidentally splash her, and you mutter an apology, knowing better than to argue. Here's the quirky tidbit. Babylonians believed social status was divinely ordained, so some nobles wore amulets shaped like tiny thrones to flaunt their God-given rank. You roll your eyes at the thought. Your gods seem more interested in smiting than promoting you. Historians still argue whether class mobility was possible or just a pipe dream, with some clay tablets hinting at rare rags to riches stories. You're not holding your breath. You lug your water home, dodging a gaggle of scribes, middle-class types who act like they're Marduk's cousins. One nearly trips over your jug, then snaps at you to watch it. You bite back a retort. Mouthing off could land you in a judge's bad graces, and Hammurabi's code doesn't favor the little guy. Joke time. Why is a Babylonian commoner always quiet? Because the nobles have louder gods. You pass a slave chiseling a wall, his back scarred from whips. You look away, your stomach twisting. Class isn't just status, it's survival. By noon, you're at the market, not to buy, but to sell a few clay pots your sister made. A noble's steward haggles you down to a pittance, and you grit your teeth knowing you can't push back. The market's a class showcase. Slaves haul goods, merchants count silver, and nobles glide through like they own the air. You spot a kid, probably a slave's son, eyeing your barley cake. You slip him a piece, remembering your own hungry days. Another joke. What's a Babylonian social ladder? A mud brick wall with no steps. The day drags, and you're bone tired, the weight of your status heavier than your jug. You think back to the river's moody floods yesterday. At least nature's impartial. Here, every glance, every deal reminds you of your place. You head home, passing the ziggurat shadow, where priests live better than you ever will. Tomorrow might mean more market hustling or back to the fields, but for now, you just want to slump in your tiny home where the world's a little less stratified and dream of a Babylon where you're not always looking up. You're still weaving through the dusty maze of ancient Babylon, the sting of yesterday's class divide still prickling your pride. Today, you're thrust into a different kind of grind. Scribal school, where you're training to become a cuneiform scribe. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not here by choice. Your family scraped together their last bits of silver to get you this shot at a better life. The school's a cramped room in a mud brick building, and the work's so grueling you're starting to think field labor was a vacation. Your fingers ache, your eyes burn, and the teacher's glare is sharper than a reed stylus. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat, a damp clay tablet balanced on your lap. Your task is to etch cuneiform signs, wedge-shaped marks that record everything from taxes to myths. The tablet's slippery, and your stylus keeps slipping, turning your signs into mush. Mainstream history celebrates cuneiform as one of humanity's first writing systems, birthed in Mesopotamia to track trade and laws. But right now, it feels like a punishment. You're copying a list of barley measurements, and one wrong wedge could earn you a whack from the teacher's stick. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some scribal students had to memorize omen texts, like one claiming a crooked cuneiform stroke predicted a king's death. You're not sure if it's nonsense or a divine warning, but you're double-checking your wedges just in case. Historians still argue whether scribal training was elite education or glorified torture, with clay tablets showing students' complaints scratched into margins. You relate. Your tablet's a mess, and the teacher's barking corrections like you've insulted Marduk himself. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian scribe always stressed? His homework could curse a kingdom. The room's stifling, the air thick with clay dust and the sweat of a dozen boys. Your neighbor, a cocky kid with better wedges, smirks at your smudged tablet. You resist the urge to accidentally bump his work. The teacher drones on about Sumerian verbs, a dead language you're forced to learn because tradition's a tyrant. Your head's spinning. Cuneiform's not just writing, it's math, law, and mythology crammed into one. You think back to the marketplace's chaos a few days ago. At least there, a bad deal didn't feel like failing a god. By afternoon, your fingers are cramping, and you've got clay under your nails. You're supposed to master 600 signs, but you're stuck on 20. The teacher assigns you to copy a hymn to Inanna, the love goddess, and you groan. More wedges, more chances to mess up. Another joke. What's a scribe's favorite pickup line? My cuneiform's sharper than your heart. You sneak a glance at the window, craving the breeze, but all you see is the ziggurat's shadow, a reminder of the priests who'll read your work if you ever graduate. You trudge home, your tablet tucked under your arm, its weight a metaphor for your dreams. The streets are quieter now, but the class divide from yesterday lingers. Scribes might climb the social ladder, but you're not there yet. Tomorrow could mean more school or a break to help in the fields, but for now, you just want to collapse in your mud brick home, where the only wedges are in your nightmares, and pray you don't flunk out of Babylon's toughest classroom. You're still slogging through the sun-baked streets of ancient Babylon, the ache of yesterday's scribal school lingering in your cramped fingers. Today, you're facing a new kind of threat, not clay tablets or teachers, but the invisible menace of disease. It's around 1800 BCE, and Babylon's a petri dish of ailments, with no germ theory or pharmacies to save you. You're feeling off. Maybe it's that murky Euphrates water you've been chugging, or the market fish that smelled like regret. Either way, you're trudging to a healer's hut, hoping for a fix before things get worse. The healer's place is a dim, mud brick room reeking of herbs and something you'd rather not identify. You sit on a reed mat, clutching your stomach, while the healer, a wiry woman with coal-rimmed eyes, mutters over a clay bowl. Mainstream history notes that Babylonian medicine mixed practical remedies, like bandages, with heavy doses of magic. They knew about setting bones, but thought demons caused fevers. You're hoping for herbs, not an exorcism, but the healer's eyeing you like you're hosting a spirit party. She hands you a bitter concoction of crushed garlic and date syrup, claiming it'll chase the sickness demon. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians believed toothaches came from tiny worms sent by angry gods, so healers might drill your molar with a reed straw. Your teeth are fine, but you're not thrilled about drinking this sludge. Historians still argue whether these remedies worked or just made you too miserable to notice the pain. You gulp it down, gagging, and pray it doesn't summon more problems than it solves. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian healer so calm? She's got a demon for every diagnosis. The city's a breeding ground for trouble. Crowded alleys, open sewers, and that canal water you're still regretting. Malaria, or river fever, is common, and you've seen neighbors waste away, their skin yellow as old reeds. The healer chants to Gula, the healing goddess, and you nod along, too queasy to argue. You think back to the ziggurat's rituals a few days ago. Maybe you should have offered more to Marduk. Your stomach gurgles, and you wince, wondering if it's the water, the fish, or just Babylon's way of saying, good luck. You leave with a pouch of dried herbs and instructions to sleep under a net to trap the fever spirits. You're skeptical but too tired to scoff. The streets are quieter now, the sun dipping, but you dodge a pile of refuse that's probably breeding its own diseases. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's health plan? Pray hard and avoid the fish. You pass a kid coughing like he's auditioning for a plague, and you quicken your pace, clutching your herb pouch like a lifeline. By evening, you're back in your mud brick home, sipping barley broth, and hoping the healer's brew kicks in. The air's cooler, but your head's still fuzzy, and you're not sure if it's sickness or just exhaustion from Babylon's endless grind. You think of the scribal school's relentless wedges, the marketplace's cutthroat deals. Disease is just another hurdle in a city that never lets up. Tomorrow might mean recovery or a return to the healer, but for now, you curl up on your reed mat, the herb pouch under your head, and dream of a Babylon where the water's clean and the gods are kinder. You're still dragging yourself through the sweltering haze of ancient Babylon, last night's herbal remedy leaving a bitter aftertaste, and your stomach only slightly less rebellious. Today, you're facing a darker shadow, the ever-looming threat of war. It's around 1800 BCE, and Babylon's no peaceful oasis. You're not a soldier, yet, but the city's buzzing with rumors of raids from Elamite tribes and conscription's a real risk. You're sent to a training ground outside the city walls to help prepare supplies, but the air's thick with dread, and every shout feels like a countdown to battle. You stand in the dust, piling reeds for arrow shafts, while grizzled soldiers drill nearby, their bronze spears glinting. The training ground's a chaotic sprawl, men shouting, shields clanging, and the occasional donkey braying in protest. Mainstream history notes that Babylon's military, under kings like Hammurabi, was a disciplined machine, conquering neighbors to build an empire. But for you, a commoner, war's not glory. It's a draft notice that could yank you from your barley field to a bloody battlefield. Here's the quirky tidbit. Babylonian soldiers sometimes carried divine standards, like mini statues of Marduk, into battle, believing they'd scare enemies. You glance at a chipped clay idol nearby and wonder if it's supposed to intimidate anyone or just make you feel better about dying. Historians still argue whether these wars were driven by greed, defense, or royal ego, with clay tablets boasting of Hammurabi's victories, but silent on the body count. You're not keen to become a statistic, so you keep your head down, stacking reeds. A soldier barks at you to move faster, and you flinch, nearly dropping a bundle. Your hands are raw, and the sun's roasting you alive. Yesterday's fever's still lingering, making every step a slog. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian soldier so grumpy? His spear's sharp, but his rations are dull. You sneak a glance at the recruits, some barely older than kids, practicing thrusts with spears heavier than they are. One fumbles, and the trainer's whip cracks. Discipline's brutal, and you're glad you're just hauling supplies. You overhear talk of a recent skirmish. Raiders hit a village upriver, burning crops and taking captives. The news knots your stomach. Your family's plot isn't far from there. Conscription's random, and if the king needs bodies, you're fair game. You think back to the mud brick walls you helped build weeks ago. Those defenses feel flimsier now. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's war strategy? Pray Marduk's statue fights better than you do. You stack another bundle, dust coating your tunic, and try not to imagine yourself holding a spear instead. By afternoon, your back's screaming, and the training ground's a furnace. You pause for a sip from your jug, yep, that Euphrates water's still a gamble, and watch a chariot rumble by, its driver a noble who'll never know your name. The class divide stings, even here. Elites lead, commoners bleed. You finish your task as the sun dips, the soldier's drills fading into a rhythmic thud. You trudge home, the city's walls casting long shadows. Tomorrow might spare you the draft or pull you deeper into war's grip, but for now, you just want your mud brick corner, where the only battle is with your own weary bones. You're still slogging through the dusty grind of ancient Babylon, the echoes of yesterday's war drums still rattling in your head. Today, you're back in the city, but survival's taken a new form. Food. It's around 1800 BCE, and securing a meal in Babylon is no picnic. Scarcity, pests, and bad harvests keep your stomach on edge. You're not tending fields or dodging soldiers. You're scrounging for enough barley, dates, or fish to get through the week. The air's thick with the scent of baked bread and desperation, and every step feels like a race against hunger. You head to your family's small storage shed, a mud brick nook behind your home. Inside, clay jars hold what's left of last month's harvest, mostly barley, some lentils, and a few shriveled onions. The hall's meager, a late flood from the Euphrates. Remember that canal chaos a few days back wiped out half your neighbor's crop, and yours wasn't spared. Mainstream history notes Babylon's agriculture was a marvel, feeding thousands through irrigation and trade. But marvels don't fill your bowl when locusts or drought decide to crash the party. You check a jar and spot weevils crawling in the barley. Great. Even the bugs are eating better than you. Here's the quirky tidbit. Babylonians sometimes baked offering bread for gods, studded with sesame seeds, while commoners like you chewed gritty, bug-infested loaves. You shake out the worst of the weevils, muttering a half-hearted prayer to Nisaba, the grain goddess. Historians still argue whether food shortages were chronic or just bad luck streaks, with clay tablets recording both feasts and famines. You're definitely in the famine camp today. You trudge to the market, hoping to trade a clay pot for fish or dates. The stalls are thinner than last week. Droughts hit the traders hard. A fishmonger offers a bony carp for your pot, but it smells like it's been dead since Hammurabi's coronation. You pass, stomach growling. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian's diet so light? Because the bugs eat the heavy stuff. You settle for a handful of dates, their sticky sweetness a small win, but you're still rationing every bite. Back home, you grind barley with a stone, your arms aching like you're back stacking mud bricks. The flour's coarse, and you mix it with canal water. Yep, that questionable Euphrates stuff again. Into a flatbread dough. You cook it on a clay oven, the smoke stinging your eyes. The bread's tough, but it's food. You think of the war rumors from yesterday. Soldiers get priority rations while you're fighting weevils. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's favorite recipe? Whatever doesn't fight back. By evening, you're slumped on a reed mat, chewing your meager meal. The city's quieter now, but hunger's a loud companion. You glance at the ziggurat's distant silhouette, where priests probably dine on roasted lamb. The class divide, that old sting from a few days ago, bites harder when your stomach's empty. Tomorrow might mean bartering again or praying for a better harvest, but for now, you curl up in your mud brick corner, the taste of gritty bread lingering, and dream of a Babylon where the jars are full and the bugs find another address. You're still scraping by in the relentless heat of ancient Babylon, last night's gritty bread still sitting heavy in your gut. Today, you're not chasing food or dodging war's shadow. You're tangled in the city's spiritual web, where gods demand your constant attention. It's around 1800 BCE, and in Babylon, appeasing the divine isn't optional. It's a daily grind as real as hauling water. You're tasked with making an offering at a small neighborhood shrine, a clay altar tucked in an alley, because your family's convinced yesterday's weevil-infested barley was a sign of divine displeasure. You trudge through the city's maze, clutching a handful of lentils. Your offering, meager but all you can spare. The shrine's modest, adorned with cracked clay figurines of Anu, the sky god, and a few wilted reeds. You kneel, the ground warm under your knees, and scatter the lentils, muttering a prayer you've heard since childhood. Mainstream history notes that Babylonians lived in a polytheistic world, with gods like Marduk, Ishtar, and Anu shaping every aspect of life, from harvests to headaches. But right now, you're just hoping Anu's not as picky as the market traders. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians believed forgetting an offering could make a god forget you, leaving you cursed with bad luck or worse. You double-check your lentils, half expecting Anu to send a scorpion as a receipt. Historians still argue whether these daily rituals were genuine faith or just fear-driven habit, with clay tablets showing both fervent prayers and sarcastic complaints about greedy priests. You're leaning toward fear. Between the Euphrates floods and weevil invasions, you can't afford to skip this. A neighbor joins you, tossing a pinch of barley and grumbling about a sick kid. You nod, thinking of your own brush with fever a few days back. Those healer's herbs didn't exactly scream divine intervention. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian god so needy? They've got too many altars and not enough lentils. The air's thick with dust and the faint scent of incense from a nearby temple. You glance at the ziggurat's distant peak, where priests offer lambs while you're stuck with legumes. The class divide, that old jab, stings even in worship. You finish your prayer, but a gust scatters your lentils, and you curse under your breath. Hope that wasn't Anu's critique. You think back to the scribal school's endless wedges, the marketplace's cutthroat deals. At least those had clear rules. Here, The gods' whims are as murky as canal water. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's morning routine? Wake up, pray, and hope the gods hit snooze. You stand, brushing dust off your tunic, and dodge a kid running through the alley, his laughter a rare bright spot. By afternoon, you're back home, the shrine's weight lingering. You check your barley jar, still Weevil City, and wonder if Anu's even listening. The city hums around you, prayers rising like smoke from every corner. Tomorrow might drag you back to the fields or another altar, but for now, you slump on your reed mat, the day's heat fading into a restless dusk. You close your eyes, the shrine's clay gods staring in your mind, and dream of a Babylon where the divine cut you a break and the lentils stay where you put them. You're still stuck in the sun-scorched grind of ancient Babylon, the weight of yesterday's lentil offering to Anu lingering like a bad omen. Today, you're pulled into the messy heart of family life, where tensions flare hotter than the Mesopotamian sun. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're navigating the cramped confines of your mud brick home, where your parents, siblings, and a cranky uncle share space barely big enough for a donkey. The air's thick with the smell of barley broth and unspoken grudges, and every word feels like a spark near dry reeds. You wake to your uncle's snoring, a sound that could wake Marduk himself. Your family's arguing over who's tending the barley plot today. Your sister says it's your turn, but you're still sore from hauling canal water. Babylonian households, mainstream history tells us, were tight-knit but hierarchical, with the father ruling like a mini-king under Hammurabi's code. Your dad's in charge, but he's stressed, muttering about taxes and a neighbor's lawsuit over a stray goat. You're expected to pitch in, no questions asked, but the constant bickering makes you miss the marketplace's chaos. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonian families kept clay house gods in niches, believing they'd settle domestic spats if you whispered to them. You glance at the chipped figurine in the corner, tempted to ask it to shut your uncle up. Historians still argue whether these gods were spiritual or just a way to vent, with tablets showing families blaming divine moods for bad days. You're not sure the figurine's listening, but you're ready to try anything to avoid another shouting match. Your sister's mad because you ate the last date, and your dad's yelling about a broken plow. You try to mediate, but it's like herding scorpions. You step outside to escape, dodging a neighbor's kid who's chucking pebbles. The alley's narrow, and you hear another family's argument spilling out. Seems universal in Babylon. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian family so loud? They've got more drama than a ziggurat's priests. You think back to the scribal school's relentless wedges. At least there, you could hide behind a tablet. By noon, you're sent to fetch water, a chore you hate since that Euphrates fever hit you hard. You lug the jug back, only to find your uncle's borrowed your reed mat for his nap. You grit your teeth, knowing Hammurabi's code won't help with family theft. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's home like? A mud brick box, where everyone's the boss. You cook a pot of lentil stew, the same lentils you didn't offer to Anu yesterday. And the irony's not lost on you. The meal's tense, with your dad grumbling about the king's latest levy. As evening falls, the house quiets, but the tension's still there, like dust you can't sweep out. You slump on the floor, Uncle's still got your mat, listening to the city's hum. The class divide, the gods' demands, the constant hunger from days past, they all creep into your family's squabbles, making every fight feel bigger. Tomorrow might mean more chores or a trip to the market, but for now, you close your eyes, the figurines blank stare in your mind, and dream of a Babylon where your home's a refuge, not a battlefield, and your uncle at least snores a little quieter. You're still caught in the sweaty, dusty churn of ancient Babylon, the echoes of yesterday's family squabbles still ringing in your ears like a badly tuned lyre. Today you're yanked out of the domestic fray and thrust into a new kind of chaos, working in a potter's workshop. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're helping your cousin, a potter, churn out clay vessels to sell at the market. The workshop's a cramped, noisy furnace of a place, and the air's thick with the smell of wet clay and your own regrets. One wrong move, and you're either breaking a pot or your cousin's patience. You stand at a wooden table, kneading a lump of river clay, your hands slick and aching. The workshop's a cacophony, wheels spinning, apprentices shouting, and the kiln roaring like an angry god. Your cousin's barking orders, telling you to shape jars for oil, not whatever lumpy nonsense you're making. Mainstream history notes that Babylonian pottery was a cornerstone of daily life, with standardized vessels for everything from beer to burial offerings. But right now, your jar looks like it's auditioning for the reject pile, and you're sweating harder than you did hauling canal water. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some potters etched tiny cuneiform prayers into their clay, believing it'd make the vessels blessed for buyers. Your cousin's too busy to bother, but you're tempted to scratch "Help me" into your lopsided jar. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions were spiritual or just marketing flair, with some tablets suggesting potters got fined for shoddy work. You're not risking a fine, so you focus, spinning the wheel and praying your jar doesn't collapse. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian potter so stressed? His jars have to hold oil and his dreams. The kiln's heat is brutal, and you're dodging sparks while stacking greenware. Unfired pots that wobble like your confidence. An apprentice drops a tray, and clay shards fly, earning a curse from your cousin that'd make Marduk blush. You think back to the family arguments yesterday. At least here, the chaos is predictable. Another apprentice, a kid with clay-smeared cheeks, sneaks you a barley cake, and you nod thanks, chewing through the grit. The workshop's dangerous. Last week, a kiln explosion singed a guy's beard off. Another joke. What's a potter's worst day? When the kiln says, "Not today, pal." By afternoon, your arms feel like overworked dough, and you've got clay in places you didn't know existed. You finally shape a decent jar, but your cousin grunts, "It'll do," which is as close to praise as you'll get. The market's picky. Buyers want perfection, and nobles won't touch anything less. You think of the class divide from days ago, how elites sip from glazed pots while you drink from cracked ones. The day drags, and you're bone-tired, the workshop's din fading as the sun dips. You trudge home, clay-crusted and smelling like a riverbank, the ziggurat's shadow mocking your hustle. Tomorrow might mean more pots or a return to the fields, but for now, you just want your reed mat, assuming your uncle hasn't stolen it again. You collapse in your mud brick corner, the day's labor heavy in your bones, and dream of a Babylon where jars shape themselves, and the kiln's a little less likely to blow up in your face. You're still slogging through the sun-baked chaos of ancient Babylon, the clay from yesterday's pottery workshop still caked under your nails. Today, You're yanked from the city's clamor and sent on a riskier mission, joining a trade caravan heading out from Babylon's gates. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're tagging along with a merchant crew hauling barley and textiles to a neighboring city-state. The open road promises profit but also danger. Bandits, heat, and bad omens lurk beyond the mud brick walls. You're not thrilled, but your family needs the silver, so here you are, trudging into the unknown. You stand at the city's edge, the Euphrates glinting behind you as the caravan assembles. Donkeys laden with sacks, merchants muttering prayers to Nergal, the god of safe travels. Your job's simple: help guard the goods and keep the donkeys from bolting. Mainstream history notes that Babylon's trade network stretched across Mesopotamia, linking cities like Ur and Assur with goods like wool, grain, and lapis lazuli. But right now, you're less a trader and more a nervous pack mule, clutching a reed staff and scanning the horizon for trouble. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some merchants tied tiny clay amulets to their donkeys, etched with cuneiform to ward off road demons. You spot one dangling from a donkey's harness, its chipped face looking as skeptical as you feel. Historians still argue whether these charms were superstition or just morale boosters, with tablets recording merchants' gripes about lost cargo. You're not banking on magic. Your eyes are peeled for bandits who'd gut you for a sack of barley. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian trader so jumpy? His donkeys are braver than he is. The caravan lurches forward, dust rising like a storm. The heat's brutal, and your tunic's already soaked. You trudge beside a donkey, its load swaying, and dodge a kick when it decides you're too close. The lead merchant, a bearded grump with a bronze dagger, barks at you to keep up. You think back to the potter's kiln yesterday. Its sparks were bad, but at least they weren't armed. A fellow guard, a lanky guy with a scar, whispers about a raided caravan last month. Left nothing but bones, he says, and you grip your staff tighter. By noon, the road's a furnace, and your water jug's half empty. Yep, that Euphrates water's still a gamble. You pass a crumbled shrine, its altar littered with broken pottery, and toss a pebble as a half-hearted offering. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's road trip vibe? Sweat, prayers, and hoping the bandits overslept. The terrain's rough, cracked earth, thorny scrub, and the occasional scorpion that makes you jump. The merchant checks a clay map, muttering about a shortcut, but Scar Guy shakes his head. You're not sure who to trust, but you're stuck with them. As the sun dips, the caravan halts near a dry wadi. You help unload, your arms screaming, and slump under a scraggly tamarisk tree. The merchants haggle over guard shifts, and you're stuck with the midnight watch. The ziggurat's long gone, but Babylon's risks, floods, fevers, family fights, feel tame compared to this. Tomorrow might bring bandits or a safe arrival, but for now, you chew a stale barley cake, the stars cold above, and dream of a Babylon where the roads are safe and the donkeys don't hate you. You're still out in the wilds beyond ancient Babylon, the dust from yesterday's caravan trail still clinging to your tunic, and the ache of a sleepless night watch heavy in your bones. Today, you're back in the city, but not for rest. You're swept into the frenzied whirlwind of Babylon's New Year festival, the Akitu. It's around 1800 BCE, And this multi-day celebration is the city's biggest party, honoring Marduk and renewing the king's divine mandate. You're not a noble sipping date wine. You're a commoner, dragged into the chaos of rituals, parades, and exhaustion that could outlast a sandstorm. You stand in a packed street, the air thick with incense, sweat, and the hum of chanting crowds. The festival's in full swing. Drums throb, dancers spin in linen skirts, and priests haul Marduk's statue on a gilded platform. Your job's to help carry offerings, a basket of barley and figs that's heavier than it looks. Mainstream history notes the Akitu was a religious and political powerhouse, reinforcing Babylon's unity and Marduk's supremacy. But right now, you're just trying not to drop your load or get trampled by the mob. Here's the quirky tidbit. During Akitu, the king was ritually humiliated by priests, slapped to prove his humility before Marduk. You catch a glimpse of the royal procession and wonder if the king's ego stings as much as your arms. Historians still argue whether this was genuine piety or political theater, with tablets hinting at both devotion and cynical stagecraft. You're too busy dodging a drunken reveler to care. Festivals are supposed to be fun, but you're sweating like you're back in the potter's workshop. The crowd surges toward the ziggurat, and you're pushed along, your basket wobbling. A kid snatches a fig, and you let it slide. Hammurabi's code doesn't cover festival fruit theft, right? Joke time. Why's the Akitu so wild? Because even Marduk needs a party to chill. You think back to the caravan's bandit fears yesterday. At least here, the only threat's a sore back or a wayward elbow. The air's alive with music, lyres, flutes, and chants that make your head spin. You're supposed to feel divine joy, but you're mostly feeling the weight of that barley. By afternoon, you've handed off your basket to a priest who barely nods. You're free to join the revelry, but your feet ache, and the heat's relentless. Yep, that Euphrates water jug's still your only friend, murky or not. You snag a sip and watch a mock battle, actors reenacting Marduk's victory over chaos. The crowd roars, but you're distracted by a vendor selling overpriced flatbread. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's festival budget? Enough for one fig and a prayer. You munch a stale crust, the class divide stinging as nobles feast nearby on roasted lamb. As dusk falls, the festival's glow softens, but you're bone tired, the city's pulse still pounding. You slip away from the ziggurat's shadow, weaving through drunks and devotees. The Akitu's meant to renew Babylon, but you're just hoping to renew your energy. Tomorrow might mean cleanup duty or back to the fields, but for now, you collapse in your mud brick corner, the distant drums fading, and dream of a Babylon where festivals don't feel like a marathon and the gods throw a quieter party. You're still reeling from the dizzying whirl of ancient Babylon, the Akitu festival's drums still echoing faintly in your head as you wake in your cramped mud brick home. Today, you're pulled into a grim reality that underpins the city's bustle: slavery. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not enslaved yet, but you're tasked with delivering barley to a noble's estate, where you'll see the stark fate of those who've lost their freedom. The air's heavy with dust and the weight of Babylon's social machine, and every step toward the estate feels like a brush with a life you're desperate to avoid. You trudge through the city's alleys, a sack of barley slung over your shoulder, the ziggurat's shadow a distant reminder of yesterday's festival. The estate's outside the main walls, a sprawling compound of mud brick and palm frond shade. You pass guards with bronze spears, their eyes hard, and enter a courtyard where slaves toil, hauling water, grinding grain, or weaving under the overseer's whip. Mainstream history notes slavery was woven into Babylon's economy, with debtors, war captives, and even children sold to settle debts, as per Hammurabi's code. You're one bad harvest from joining them, and the thought knots your stomach. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some slaves wore clay tags around their necks, etched with their owner's name, like grim dog collars. You spot one on a woman grinding barley, her face blank as stone, and you look away, your sack suddenly feeling heavier. Historians still argue whether slavery was a brutal norm or a complex system, with tablets showing some slaves earned freedom while others died in chains. You're not sticking around to debate. You just want to drop your barley and get out. You hand the sack to a steward, a sour man who barely glances at you. A slave nearby stumbles, spilling a jug, and the overseer's whip cracks, the sound sharp as a scorpion's sting. You flinch, thinking of the potter's workshop chaos a few days back. Hard work, sure, but you could leave. These people can't. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian slave's day so long? Because freedom's just a fairy tale here. You hurry through the courtyard, dodging a kid, probably born into slavery, sweeping dust with a reed broom. His eyes meet yours, and you feel a pang you can't shake. By noon, you're back in the city, the estate's weight lingering like bad canal water. You pass a market stall where a man's selling his daughter to settle a debt, his voice low and broken. You think of your own family's fights, the lentil offerings, the constant hustle. Slavery's the shadow behind every struggle. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's worst debt? The one that costs your name. The sun's brutal, and your water jug's low. That Euphrates murk still a gamble you're forced to drink. As evening falls, you're home. The city's hum quieter, but no less heavy. You slump on your reed mat, the estate's images, whips, tags, empty eyes, sticking like clay. The festival's joy feels like a lifetime ago. Babylon's glitter hides a brutal truth. Tomorrow might mean more deliveries or back to the fields. But for now, you close your eyes, the overseer's whip echoing in your mind, and dream of a Babylon where no one's bound by clay tags and every step is your own. You're still trudging through the sun-scorched sprawl of ancient Babylon, the grim images of yesterday's slave-filled estate still haunting your thoughts like a bad omen. Today, you're back in the city's heart, tasked with a job that's less harrowing but no less demanding, helping maintain one of Babylon's massive gates, the grand entrances that scream the city's power. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not an engineer. You're a commoner hauling tools and mixing mortar for the real builders. The air's thick with dust and the clang of chisels, and every moment reminds you of Babylon's obsession with grandeur. You stand at the base of the Ishtar Gate, or its earlier version, before the blue tiles and lions of later fame. It's a towering mud brick beast, flanked by statues of Mushusu dragons, their snake-like heads glaring down. Your job's to cart clay and straw to the masons, who are reinforcing the gate against wear and rare rains. Mainstream history notes Babylon's gates were engineering marvels, blending function with propaganda to awe visitors and deter invaders. But right now, you're just praying you don't drop a load of bricks and earn a foreman's curse. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some workers hid tiny clay votive figures in the gate's foundations, believing they'd make the structure divinely sturdy. You spot one being tucked into a crevice, its lopsided face looking as tired as you feel. Historians still argue whether these were acts of faith or just builders hedging bets, with tablets silent on their actual impact. You're not banking on divine cement. You're too busy hauling a basket of clay, your back screaming louder than a market trader. Joke time. Why's Babylon's gate so tough? It's got more prayers than your uncle's snoring. The work's grueling, and the sun's relentless, baking you like the bricks you're stacking. A mason snaps at you to hurry, and you nearly trip over a stray tool, earning a laugh from a coworker. You think back to the caravan's bandit risks a few days ago. At least here, the only danger's a bruised ego or a crushed toe. The gate's carvings, half finished, show Marduk slaying chaos, and you wonder if chaos includes foremen. Another joke. What's a Babylonian builder's dream? A gate that builds itself and a boss who naps. By noon, your tunic's a dusty mess, and your water jug's down to its last murky sip. Yep, that Euphrates gamble again. You pause to watch a pulley hoist a massive stone, the ropes creaking like your joints. The gate's a symbol of Babylon's might, but it's also a reminder of your place. Commoners like you keep it standing, while nobles stroll through. The class divide, that old sting from the estate, bites again. You hand off your basket and slump in a sliver of shade, chewing a stale barley cake. As dusk settles, the gate looms prouder, but you're bone-tired, the day's labor heavy as the bricks you hauled. You trudge home, the ziggurat silhouette mocking your hustle. Tomorrow might mean more gate work or a return to the market's chaos, but for now, you collapse on your reed mat, the dragon statue's glare lingering in your mind, and dream of a Babylon where gates don't need your sweat and the gods guard their own doors. You're still slogging through the dusty grind of ancient Babylon, the ache from yesterday's gate building clinging to your muscles like stubborn clay. Today, you're pulled into a different kind of Babylonian obsession, astrology, where the stars dictate your every move. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not gazing at the night sky for fun. You're consulting an astrologer to decide if tomorrow's a safe day to fix your family's plow. The air's thick with incense and nervous hope, and in Babylon, the heavens aren't just pretty, they're a cosmic rulebook you ignore at your peril. You trudge to a small mud brick house near the market, where the astrologer, a wiry man with a star-etched robe, sits surrounded by clay tablets. He's reading omens from last night's sky, muttering about Jupiter's position. Your job's to stand there, clutch your barley sack, payment for his wisdom, and pray he doesn't see doom in your future. Mainstream history notes that Babylonian astrology was a science of its time, with priests mapping stars to predict everything from floods to wars. But right now, you're just hoping the stars green-light your plow repair, not a plague. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some astrologers claimed a misaligned star could curse your goats to stop milking, so they'd burn fish bones to fix it. You spot a pile of charred bones in the corner and wonder if your goats are next. Historians still argue whether these omens were serious predictions or just priestly power grabs, with tablets listing bizarre signs like, "If a comet appears, the king sneezes." You're not laughing. Your family's leaning on this guy's word, and you're not keen to argue with the sky. The astrologer squints at a tablet, then at you, like you're personally offending Venus. He declares tomorrow's inauspicious for plow work, but fine for offerings to Shamash, the sun god. You nod, hiding your frustration. Another day's delay means more weevils in your barley. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian astrologer so smug? He's got the stars and your lunch. You think back to the Ishtar Gates dragons yesterday. Those felt less judgmental than this guy's stare. You hand over the barley, your stomach grumbling, and leave with a vague warning about lunar shadows. By noon, you're back in the alleys, dodging a kid selling star-shaped amulets for cosmic luck. The city's buzzing with omen talk. Someone saw a weird cloud, and now half the street's praying. You're skeptical, but toss a pebble at a Shamash shrine just in case. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's daily planner? Whatever the stars didn't veto. The sun's brutal, and your water jug's low. Yep, that Euphrates merc's still your risky sidekick. You think of the Akitu festival's wild energy. Even that felt less suffocating than the stars' grip. As evening falls, you're home, the astrologer's words heavy as the ziggurat's shadow. You tell your dad about the plow delay, and he grumbles, blaming you, not Jupiter. The class divide stings. Nobles probably get better omens. Tomorrow might mean shrine visits or more market hustling. But for now, you slump on your reed mat, the stars glinting through your window like nosy gods, and dream of a Babylon where the heavens mind their own business and your plow gets fixed without cosmic permission. You're still slogging through the relentless dust of ancient Babylon, the astrologer's cryptic warnings about lunar shadows still buzzing in your head like an annoying fly. Today, you're back in the city's cramped alleys, but the challenge is closer to home. Dodging neighborly disputes that flare up faster than a kiln fire. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're caught in a squabble over a shared wall that's crumbling faster than your patience. The air's thick with the smell of tanning hides and simmering grudges, and every word with your neighbor feels like a step toward a judge's gavel. You stand in the narrow alley outside your mud brick home, facing your neighbor, a wiry potter with a temper sharper than his tools. He claims your family's donkey kicked his wall, causing a crack. You're sure his shoddy repairs are to blame. The wall's a shared mess, barely standing, and the arguments drawing a crowd of nosy onlookers. Mainstream history notes that Babylonian neighborhoods were tight-knit but volatile, with Hammurabi's code spelling out penalties for property disputes, like fines or forced repairs. You're hoping to avoid a judge, because your barley sack's already light from yesterday's astrologer payment. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians buried clay curse tablets under disputed walls, hoping to hex their neighbors into backing down. You're tempted to try it, but you'd rather not anger Anu over a donkey's bad aim. Historians still argue whether these tablets were common or just petty revenge fantasies, with some tablets found etched with insults like, "May his kiln explode." You keep your cool, but the potter's yelling about Law 232. Faulty walls mean you pay for damage, and you counter that his repairs were flimsier than a reed mat. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian neighbor so loud? He's got a wall to blame and a grudge to flame. The crowd's no help, whispering bets on who'll crack first. You think back to the pottery workshop's chaos a few days ago. Its noise was easier to tune out than this. A kid nearby tosses a pebble, nearly hitting you, and you glare, wishing the stars from yesterday's astrologer visit had warned you about this. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's alley like? A courtroom with worse snacks. You suggest splitting repair costs, but the potter scoffs, demanding you fix it all. You're one shout from dragging this to the elders, but that means more silver and time you don't have. By noon, the sun's roasting the alley, and your water jug's dry. Yep, that Euphrates Merc's still a gamble you're avoiding today. You compromise, offering to haul clay for the repairs if he shuts up. He grumbles but agrees, and the crowd disperses, disappointed. You trudge to fetch clay, your tunic sticking to your skin, the ziggurat's shadow mocking your hustle. The class divide stings. Nobles don't bicker over crumbling walls. They've got slaves for that. You think of the estate's whipped slaves, the gate's looming dragons. Babylon's grandeur feels far from this petty fight. As evening settles, the walls patched, but the tension lingers like dust in the air. You slump on your reed mat, the potter's glare burned into your mind. Tomorrow might mean more neighborly nonsense or a return to the fields, but for now, you close your eyes, the alley's echoes fading, and dream of a Babylon where walls hold strong and neighbors fight their battles with someone else. You're still wading through the dusty, sweat-soaked grind of ancient Babylon, the sting of yesterday's neighborly spat over that crumbling wall still prickling like a thorn under your skin. Today, you're facing a new kind of pressure. Taxation, the king's relentless hand reaching into your already light barley sack. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're scrambling to gather enough grain or silver to satisfy the royal collectors, who roam the city like hawks circling a field. The air's heavy with the scent of baked earth and your own rising panic, and every step feels like a countdown to a debt you can't dodge. You're at your family's mud brick home, sorting through clay jars to see what's left after weeks of weevils and offerings. The tax collector's due today, and you've heard he's not in a forgiving mood. Your dad's muttering about last year's levy that forced your cousin into debt slavery. Yep, that grim estate you saw a few days back still haunts you. Mainstream history notes that Babylon's taxes, enforced under Hammurabi's code, funded palaces, armies, and ziggurats, with commoners like you bearing the brunt. But right now, you're just praying you've got enough barley to keep the collector's spear at bay. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians tried bribing collectors with lucky clay charms, etched with cuneiform pleas for mercy. You're tempted to slip one into your grain sack, but you've got no charms, just a half-empty jar and a bad feeling. Historians still argue whether tax evasion was rampant or just desperate, with tablets recording fines for short payments, but also tales of collectors losing records for a price. You're not that lucky, so you scoop what's left of your barley, hoping it's enough to avoid a penalty like hauling bricks for the palace. You trudge to the city square, where the collector, a burly man with a bronze tablet, sits under a palm canopy, glaring like he's personally offended by your existence. You pour your barley into his scale, and he grunts, saying it's short by a shekel's worth. Your stomach knots. Arguing's risky, but so's losing more grain. You think back to the alley dispute yesterday. Haggling with a neighbor was easier than this. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian tax collector so grim? He's got your barley and your dreams. You offer a clay pot as extra and he relents. but you're left with barely enough for the week. By noon, you're back home, the sun searing your shoulders and your water jug empty. Yep, that Euphrates Merc's a gamble you're too broke to risk today. You pass a noble's litter, his slaves hauling silver for taxes he'll never miss. The class divide, that old burn, hits hard when you're scraping by. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's tax plan? Pray Marduk miscounts the shekels. You check your jars again, hoping for a miracle, but it's just weevils and dust. The ziggurat's shadow looms, a reminder of where your taxes go. Priests and kings, not you. As evening falls, you're slumped on your reed mat, the collector's grunt echoing in your head. The city's hum is quieter, but the weight of survival's louder than ever. You think of the Akitu festival's fleeting joy, the gates looming dragons. Babylon's splendor feels like a taunt when you're this close to empty. Tomorrow might mean bartering at the market or more fieldwork, but for now, you close your eyes, the sting of taxes heavy, and dream of a Babylon where the king's hand is lighter and your jars are never bare. You're still scraping by in the sun-scorched sprawl of ancient Babylon, the sting of yesterday's tax collector's grunt still burning like a bad batch of canal water. Today, you're thrust into one of the city's strangest customs, the marriage market, a bizarre auction where young women are paraded for suitors. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not a bidder. You're helping your cousin, who's reluctantly up for sale, by carrying her dowry basket through the crowded square. The air's thick with the scent of myrrh and nervous whispers, and every step feels like wading through a mix of tradition and absurdity. You stand in the bustling market square, not far from where you haggled for oil weeks ago, but today it's transformed. A wooden platform holds a line of women, some fidgeting, others stone-faced, as a crier shouts their virtues: cooking skills, weaving, or pleasant tempers. Your cousin's nervous, clutching her linen veil, and you're hauling a basket of barley and clay pots, her dowry to sweeten the deal. Mainstream history, through Herodotus's later accounts, describes Babylon's marriage market as a system to ensure every woman wed, with dowries balancing the process. But right now, it feels like a livestock auction, and you're not sure who's more uncomfortable, you or her. Here's the quirky tidbit. The prettiest women were bid on first, their dowries funding matches for less desirable ones. And some Babylonians swore the gods picked the pairs through omens. You spot a priest tossing barley grains to read a match, and you roll your eyes. Yesterday's astrologer was bad enough. Historians still argue whether this market was real or exaggerated by Greek travelers, with no Babylonian tablets confirming it outright. You're just hoping your cousin lands a decent husband, not some grump who'll make her life harder than a tax levy. The crier calls her name, and you nudge her forward, the basket heavy on your shoulder. A merchant with a greasy beard bids a shekel, and you wince. Your cousin's worth more than his stale dates. You think back to the potter's workshop chaos. At least there, you could curse the kiln, not fate. Joke time? Why's the marriage market so tense? Because love's just a bid and a prayer. Another bidder, a farmer with kind eyes, ups the offer, and you relax a fraction. The crowd's buzzing, some cheering, others haggling like it's a barley deal. You hand the dowry to a scribe, who tallies it with a bored grunt. By noon, your cousin's matched to the farmer, and you're relieved. She's dodged the greasy guy. You trudge home, the sun brutal and your water jug low. Yep, that Euphrates merc's still a risky bet. You pass a noble's litter, his bride probably picked in a cushy palace deal, not a dusty square. The class divide, that old jab, stings again. Another joke. What's a Babylonian bride's dream? A groom who doesn't bid like he's buying a goat. You think of the ziggurat's rituals, the gate's dragons. Babylon's grandeur feels hollow when love's a transaction. As evening settles, you're back on your reed mat, the market's clamor fading. Your cousin's future's set, but the days left you uneasy, like you've seen too much of Babylon's underbelly. Tomorrow might mean field work or more market hustling, but for now, you close your eyes, the crier's voice lingering, and dream of a Babylon where matches are made by hearts, not silver, and dowries don't come in baskets you have to haul. You're still trudging through the sweaty, dusty chaos of ancient Babylon, the awkward weight of yesterday's marriage market still lingering like a bad deal in the bazaar. Today, you're yanked back into the city's martial pulse, forced to join a military drill under the scorching sun. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not a soldier. Yet. But Babylon's commanders don't care. You've been roped into training as a reserve, meaning you're sweating through spear practice with a bunch of other reluctant commoners. The air's thick with the clang of bronze and the shouts of drill masters, and every thrust feels like a reminder you're one draft away from a real battlefield. You stand on a dusty plain just outside the city walls, clutching a heavy reed spear that's more splinter than weapon. The drill master, a scarred brute with a voice like a sandstorm, barks at you to thrust harder, as if you're personally insulting Hammurabi. Mainstream history notes that Babylon's army was a well-oiled machine, with conscripts like you filling ranks alongside professional soldiers to defend or expand the empire. But right now, you're just trying not to stab your own foot or faint from the 110-degree heat. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonian recruits carried clay war charms etched with prayers to Nergal, the war god, believing they'd dodge arrows. You spot a guy nearby clutching one, and you're tempted to ask for a spare, your spearworks shakier than a weevil-infested barley jar. Historians still argue whether these drills were effective or just brutal hazing, with tablets boasting of victories but silent on how many recruits limped home. You thrust again, your arms screaming, and dodge a glare from the drill master. Joke time. Why is a Babylonian drill so rough? Because the spears are sharp, but the tempers are sharper. Your group's practicing a shield wall maneuver, but it's a mess. Half the lines tripping over their own feet, and you're no exception. You think back to the tax collector's grunt a few days ago. You'd rather face his scales than this guy's whip. The dust's choking, and your water jug's empty. Yep, that Euphrates merc's a risk you can't afford mid-drill. Another recruit, a lanky kid, drops his spear and gets a tongue lashing that'd make Marduk flinch. Another joke. What's a Babylonian soldier's motto? Thrust first, cry later. By noon, you're drenched in sweat, your tunic a gritty rag. The drill master finally calls a break, and you slump under a scraggly palm, chewing a stale barley cake that tastes like regret. You glance at the city's mud brick walls, the ones you helped build weeks ago. They feel safer than this open plain. The class divide stings. Nobles ride chariots in battle while you're stuck with a splintery stick. You overhear talk of an Elamite raid upriver, and your stomach knots. Drills like this mean war's never far off. As dusk settles, the drill ends, but your muscles feel like they've been through a siege. You trudge home, the ziggurat's shadow looming like a judgmental god. Tomorrow might spare you the spear or drag you back to the fields, but for now, you collapse on your reed mat. The drill master shouts echoing in your head, and dream of a Babylon where wars are fought by charms, not commoners, and your spear stays firmly in someone else's hands. You're still limping through the sun-baked grind of ancient Babylon, the bruises from yesterday's military drill throbbing like a bad omen under your skin. Today, you're back in the city's suffocating alleys, grappling with a problem that's less glorious than spears but just as punishing: sanitation. It's around 1800 BCE, and Babylon's streets are a reeking, filthy maze of refuse, open sewers, and the kind of smells that make your eyes water. You're tasked with clearing a clogged drainage ditch near your home, a job that's as grim as it sounds. The air's thick with the stench of rot and the buzz of flies, and every shovelful feels like a personal insult from the gods. You stand in a narrow alley, ankle deep in muck, wielding a reed shovel that's barely holding together. The ditch, a shallow trench meant to carry waste to the Euphrates, is blocked with everything from kitchen scraps to things you'd rather not name. Mainstream history notes that Babylon had rudimentary drainage systems, a step above other ancient cities, but they were prone to clogs and overflow, especially in crowded neighborhoods like yours. Right now, you're cursing the genius who thought mud brick cities and open sewers were a winning combo. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians tossed cleansing clay charms into sewers, believing they'd appease river spirits and keep the drains flowing. You spot a broken charm in the sludge, its cuneiform smudged, and wonder if it's mocking you. Historians still argue whether these charms were practical or just desperate superstition, with tablets silent on whether they unclogged anything.
You're not holding your breath. Your shovel's doing more than any charm, and your back's screaming louder than the drill master from yesterday. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian sewer so rude? It's got no filter and worse manners. The alley's a swamp of filth, and you're dodging flies the size of dates while neighbors grumble about the smell. A kid tosses a rotten fig into the ditch, and you snap at him, your patience thinner than your shovel's edge. You think back to the marriage market's awkward bustle. Its chaos was cleaner than this. The heat's brutal, and your water jug's low. Yep, that Euphrates murk's a gamble you're avoiding after last week's fever. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's least favorite chore? Ditch duty, unless you love swimming in regret. By noon, you've cleared half the clog, but your tunic's a sopping, stinking rag, and you're pretty sure you'll never feel clean again.
A neighbor pitches in, muttering about a recent flood that turned the alley into a cesspool. You nod, remembering the Euphrates' moody floods from weeks ago. Nature and neglect make a nasty team. The class divide stings. Nobles live in area estates with private drains, while you're knee-deep in everyone's mess. You shovel faster, hoping to finish before the ziggurat's shadow swallows the alley. As evening falls, the ditch is mostly clear, but the stench lingers like a bad guest. You trudge home, scrubbing your hands with sand, the city's hum drowned out by your own exhaustion. Tomorrow might mean more grunt work, or a trip to the market, but for now, you collapse on your reed mat. The ditches reek, clinging to your dreams, and wish for a Babylon where the streets are as grand as the gates and the sewers keep their secrets to themselves. You're still slogging through the dusty, sweat-drenched chaos of ancient Babylon, the stench of yesterday's sewer ditch duty still clinging to your skin like a bad memory. Today, you're pulled into a different kind of Babylonian obsession, the mythical tales that shape how you see the world. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're not just living in a city, you're steeped in stories of gods, monsters, and epic heroes that feel as real as the ziggurat's shadow. You're sitting in a crowded courtyard, listening to a storyteller spin the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale that's both entertainment and a lens for Babylon's soul. The air's thick with the scent of barley beer and flickering torchlight, and every word pulls you deeper into a world of divine drama. You're cross-legged on a reed mat, surrounded by neighbors, merchants, weavers, even a kid picking his nose. The storyteller, a wiry old man with a voice like gravel, recounts Gilgamesh's quest for immortality, his battles with Humbaba, and his grief for Enkidu. Mainstream history notes that the Epic of Gilgamesh, etched on clay tablets, is one of the oldest surviving stories, reflecting Babylonian values like friendship, mortality, and defiance of fate. But right now, you're not analyzing. You're hooked, even if your back's sore from yesterday's ditch slog. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians believed reciting epic tales could ward off bad omens, like a cosmic insurance policy. You wonder if Gilgamesh's story will cancel out the sewer curse you're half convinced you've earned. Historians still argue whether these myths were moral lessons or just crowd pleasers, with tablets showing priests used them to justify temple taxes. You're not sure, but the storyteller's pause, right as Gilgamesh faces the underworld, makes you lean in, forgetting the flies buzzing around your barley cake. Joke time. Why's Gilgamesh a Babylonian favorite? He's got more drama than your neighbor's wall feud. The courtyard's alive with gasps and murmurs as the story shifts to Utnapishtim, the flood survivor who sounds like he'd have hated your Euphrates Canal days. You think back to the military drills, the marriage market's bustle. These tales make your struggles feel small, almost heroic. The kid next to you whispers that his dad saw a Humbaba-like shadow last week, and you stifle a laugh. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's bedtime story? Gilgamesh. Unless you want nightmares about sewer demons. The storyteller's voice rises, and you're swept into Gilgamesh's failure to cheat death, a gut punch that hits harder than a tax levy. By evening, the tale's done and the crowd disperses, buzzing with awe. You trudge home, the torchlit streets quieter, but your mind loud with gods and monsters. The class divide stings. Nobles probably hear these tales in cushy palaces, not dusty courtyards. Your water jug's low, and that Euphrates merc's still a gamble you're dodging. The ziggurat looms, its priests likely spinning their own myths for power. Tomorrow might mean field work or more market hustling, but for now, you slump on your reed mat, Gilgamesh's quest echoing in your head, and dream of a Babylon where you're the hero, not the one cleaning ditches, and immortality's just a story you don't have to chase. You're still trudging through the sun-scorched haze of ancient Babylon, the epic tales of Gilgamesh from last night's storytelling still swirling in your head like dust in a storm. Today, you're yanked back to a harsher reality, the constant threat of foreign invaders. It's around 1800 BCE, and Babylon's no impregnable fortress. Rumors of Elamite or Amorite raiders are spreading faster than weevils in a barley jar. You're not a soldier, But you're sent to help reinforce a watchtower near the city's edge, a grim reminder that Babylon's walls, the ones you helped build weeks ago, might not be enough. The air's thick with the scent of baked clay and creeping dread, and every distant dust cloud feels like trouble. You stand at the base of the watchtower, a squat mud brick structure that's seen better days. Your job's to haul straw and clay to patch cracks, while sentries above scan the horizon with bronze-tipped spears. Mainstream history notes that Babylon faced frequent threats from neighboring powers, with Hammurabi's empire built on both conquest and defense against tribes like the Elamites. But right now, you're just praying you don't have to see an enemy up close, because your reed staff's better for swatting flies than fighting raiders. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonian sentries burned omen incense at watchtowers, believing its smoke would reveal enemy movements in the swirls. You spot a faint wisp rising from the tower and wonder if it's signaling doom or just the sentry's lunch. Historians still argue whether these invasions were sporadic or a constant drain, with tablets boasting of victories but hinting at razed villages. You're not keen to test the odds, so you mix mortar fast, your hands raw from yesterday's myths giving way to today's fears. Joke time. Why's a Babylonian watchtower so tense? The view's great, but the guests are stabby. The work's grueling, and the sun's a hammer, pounding you harder than the military drills a few days back. A sentry shouts about a distant caravan, and your heart skips, friend or foe. It's just traitors, but the scare's enough to make you miss the sewer ditch's stink. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's worst lookout? A dust cloud with bad intentions. You think of Gilgamesh facing Humbaba. You'd take a mythical monster over real raiders any day. Your water jug's low. Yep, that Euphrates murk's still a gamble. And you ration a sip, dodging a stray clump of straw that smells like donkey. By noon, the tower's patched, but the sentries' grim faces say the threat's not gone. You overhear talk of a raided village upriver, families taken or worse. The class divide stings. Nobles hide in palaces while you're out here patching cracks for raiders to test. You trudge back to the city, the ziggurat's shadow looming like a taunt. The marriage market, the epic tales. Babylon's vibrancy feels fragile when invaders could burn it all. Tomorrow might mean more tower work or back to the fields, but for now, you collapse on your reed mat, the horizon's dust clouds haunting your mind, and dream of a Babylon where the walls hold firm and the only invaders are in stories, not your nightmares. You're still slogging through the dusty, nerve-wracking grind of ancient Babylon, the shadow of yesterday's watchtower duty, and its looming threat of raiders still tightening your chest. Today, you're pulled into one of the city's most fabled mysteries, the Hanging Gardens, a supposed marvel that's more whisper than reality. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're tasked with tending a noble's rooftop garden, the closest thing you'll get to those legendary terraces. The air's thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming herbs, but the question nags at you. Do the gardens even exist? Or are they just a Babylonian tall tale? Every step through the lush greenery feels like chasing a myth. You're on a noble's estate, climbing a mud brick staircase to a flat roof where clay pots overflow with date palms, figs, and creeping vines. Your job's to water and prune, a far cry from the watchtower's grit, but no less sweaty. The noble swears his garden's a taste of the Hanging Gardens, but you're skeptical. Nobody you know has seen the real thing. Mainstream history, through later Greek accounts, describes the gardens as a tiered wonder, irrigated by Euphrates water pumped to dizzying heights. But archaeologists find no trace, and you're starting to think it's all hype, like a merchant's bad scales. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians claimed the gardens were guarded by singing birds, trained to scare off thieves. You hear a sparrow chirp and laugh. Your cousin's donkey's scarier than that. Historians still argue whether the gardens were real, a misattributed marvel in Nineveh, or just poetic exaggeration, with no tablets from your time confirming them. You're not debating scholars. You're hauling water jugs upstairs, your arms aching worse than during military drills. Joke time. Why's the Hanging Gardens hype so big? Because Babylon loves a story taller than its ziggurat. The roof's a furnace, the sun baking you despite the shade of palms. You pour water, cleaner than the Euphrates murk you've been dodging, and trim wilted leaves, dodging bees that seem to own the place. You think back to Gilgamesh's epic quest. A mythical garden sounds nice, but this one's just work. A slave nearby, like those you saw at the estate weeks ago, sweeps dust, his eyes down. The class divide stings. Nobles lounge in these gardens while you sweat for them. Another joke. What's a Babylonian gardener's dream? A garden that waters itself, and a noble who pays. By noon, your tunic's soaked, and the noble's steward grunts approval at your work, which is as close to praise as you'll get. You glance at the city's sprawl, the ziggurat piercing the sky. If the gardens exist, they're not here. Just another tale, like omen incense or curse tablets. The raiders' threat from yesterday feels more real than this myth. You trudge home, the estate's greenery fading behind you. Tomorrow might mean more pruning or back to the market's chaos. But for now, you slump on your reed mat. The idea of cascading terraces teasing your mind, and dream of a Babylon where gardens grow without your sweat, and myths don't outshine the truth. You're still trudging through the sun-baked, myth-soaked sprawl of ancient Babylon, the whispers of the Hanging Gardens from yesterday's rooftop pruning still teasing your imagination like a mirage. Today, you're facing a darker chapter, the slow, creeping decline of Babylon's golden age. It's around 1800 BCE, and though the city's at its peak under Hammurabi, you're starting to feel cracks in its grandeur, rumors of weakening trade, grumbling nobles, and distant empires eyeing your walls. You're not a soothsayer. You're just a commoner hauling barley to a warehouse. But the city's pulse feels off, like a lyre string about to snap. The air's thick with dust and a vague unease, and every step feels like walking on borrowed time. You're outside the city, trudging along a canal to a mud brick warehouse where merchants store grain. Your job's to unload sacks, the same barley you've been scraping by on for weeks, now headed for trade or taxes. The canal's low, a bad sign after the Euphrates' moody floods you wrestled with ages ago. Mainstream history notes that Babylon's decline began after Hammurabi's death, with internal strife and invasions from Kassites and others eroding its power. But right now, you're catching early tremors. Merchants haggling less fiercely, guards eyeing the horizon like yesterday's watchtower sentries. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians buried warning clay tablets under warehouses, etched with curses against thieves or omens of collapse, hoping to protect their wealth. You spot a broken tablet in the dirt. its cuneiform faded, and wonder if it's jinxing your day. Historians still argue whether Babylon's fall was gradual or a sudden implosion, with tablets hinting at economic strain even in Hammurabi's time. You're not pondering collapse. You're just praying you don't drop a sack and earn a foreman's curse. Joke time. Why is Babylon's decline so sneaky? It's got more cracks than your neighbor's wall. The warehouse is a hive of grumbling workers, and you overhear a merchant muttering about falling silver prices. Bad news for your family's next tax levy. The heat's brutal, and your tunic's a gritty rag, reminding you of the sewer ditch's reek. You think back to the marriage market's bustle, the epic tales of Gilgamesh. Those felt vibrant, but now the city's edges seem frayed. Another joke. What's a Babylonian's worst fear? A future as dusty as his barley. Your water jug's low, that Euphrates murk's still a gamble, and you ration a sip, dodging a stray donkey that nearly topples your load. By noon your arms are screaming, and the warehouse is stacked, but the foreman's grim, muttering about short shipments. The class divide stings. Nobles won't feel this pinch, but you will. You glance at the ziggurat's distant peak, its priests still fat on offerings while you haul their grain. The raider's threat, the garden's myth. Babylon's glory feels like a fever dream slipping away. You trudge home, the canal's sluggish flow mirroring the city's pulse. Tomorrow might mean more hauling or a return to the market, but for now, you slump on your reed mat, the warehouse's dust heavy in your lungs, and dream of a Babylon where the cracks don't widen and the city's song doesn't fade. You're still dragging your weary bones through the fading glow of ancient Babylon, the weight of yesterday's warehouse labor and the city's creeping decline settling into your soul like dust in a cracked jar. Today, you're not hauling barley or dodging omens. You're reflecting on Babylon's legacy, the echoes of its grandeur that linger even as its walls begin to crumble. It's around 1800 BCE, and you're sitting on a low mud brick wall near the Euphrates, watching the river's sluggish flow and pondering what this city will leave behind. The air's soft with dusk's faint coolness, and every ripple feels like a whisper of history's long sleep. You're alone for once, no foreman barking or neighbors squabbling, just you and the river that's carried Babylon's dreams and disasters. Your job today was light, delivering a clay tablet to a scribe, but it gave you time to think. Mainstream history tells us Babylon's legacy is monumental. Hammurabi's code-shaped law, cuneiform birthed writing, and its ziggurats inspired awe for centuries. But sitting here, you feel the human cost. Your blistered hands, your empty jars, the slave's hollow eyes from that estate weeks ago. Babylon's a marvel, but it's also a machine that grinds commoners like you into dust. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Babylonians believed their city's spirit lived in its rivers, so they'd toss clay memory tokens into the Euphrates to preserve its glory. You finger a smooth pebble in your pocket, tempted to throw it in, but you're not sure if you're honoring Babylon or just saying goodbye. Historians still argue whether Babylon's influence was cultural or just a fleeting empire's boast, with tablets showing its math and myths shaping Greece and beyond. You're no scholar, you just know the city's marks are as deep in you as the cuneiform wedges you scratched in scribal school. The river glints, reflecting the ziggurat silhouette, and you think of everything you've endured, the marketplace's cutthroat deals, the Akitu's wild drums, the marriage market's awkward bids. Each moment's a thread in Babylon's tapestry, woven with sweat and prayers. Joke time. Why's Babylon's legacy so heavy? It's carrying your taxes and Gilgamesh's ego. You chuckle, but it's bittersweet. Those epic tales gave you heroes, but they didn't spare you the ditch's reek or the taxman's grunt. Another joke. What's Babylon's gift to history? Laws, stories, and your backache. The class divide stings one last time. Nobles will be remembered, but you're just a name lost to time. You think of the Hanging Gardens myth, the raider's threat. Babylon's story is half truth, half dream, and you've lived its rough edges. Your water jug's empty, but you're done with that Euphrates murk. Tonight, you just want the river's hum. As stars emerge, you toss your pebble into the water. A quiet nod to the city that's shaped you, broken you, and kept you alive. Now, let's ease away from Babylon's dusty streets, the river's murmur fading into a gentle hum. Picture yourself sinking into your reed mat, softer now, the day's weight lifting like mist off the Euphrates. The ziggurat's shadow shrinks, the god's demands grow quiet, and the city's pulse slows to a whisper. You're not hauling clay or dodging spears. You're floating, weightless, in a world where the sun's kinder and the jars are always full. Each breath pulls you deeper into calm, the stars above winking like old friends. Let Babylon's stories, its laws, its myths, its struggles, drift into the haze, leaving only peace. Sleep's calling, soft as a river's lap, and you're ready to answer. Rest now, deeply, and let the ancient world slip away. Sweet dreams.